My name is Lila Monroe, and if you're reading this, it's probably because you've heard about the chaos that unfolded at Crestwood Innovations. You know, the scandal involving patents, contracts, and corporate betrayal, so thick it could choke a boardroom full of executives. Yeah, that mess. But before we dive into all of that, let me start by telling you who I am, or at least who I was when this whole nightmare began. I'm not your typical tech founder. I didn't grow up tinkering with gadgets in my parents' garage, or dreaming of Silicon Valley glory. No, my journey started in a small town in Ohio, where the biggest innovation most people knew about was someone finally figuring out how to fix the old water pump down by Main Street. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom ran the local diner. They taught me two things: hard work pays off, and trust is something you earn, not something you hand over lightly. Fast forward through years of late-night coding sessions, scholarships, and more coffee than any human should consume, and here I am, or rather, here I was, CEO and founder of Crestwood Innovations, a company on the brink of revolutionizing renewable energy storage technology. It wasn't just some random idea I pulled out of thin air, it was personal. Growing up, I saw firsthand how unreliable power grids could devastate communities during storms or blackouts. So I built something better, something smarter, something revolutionary. The patent for our core technology, the one that would change everything, was mine. Literally. Signed, sealed, delivered. Or so I thought. Crestwood wasn't always a household name. When I first launched the company 5 years ago, it was little more than an ambitious dream scribbled on napkins and whiteboards. We were a scrappy team of engineers and designers working out of a cramped office space above a pizza shop. The smell of garlic knots wafted through the vents every afternoon, but none of us cared because we believed in what we were building. And slowly but surely, investors started believing too. Seed funding turned into Series A, then B, and eventually, Crestwood became the darling of the clean energy sector. But success has a funny way of attracting attention, and not always the good kind. That's where Victor Lang came in. He wasn't part of the original crew. In fact, he didn't even know what a lithium-ion battery looked like until his private equity firm swooped in with a massive infusion of capital during our Series C round. To be fair, Victor had a reputation for turning struggling companies around. He was sharp, charismatic, and ruthless in all the ways you'd expect from someone who'd made billions buying and selling businesses like they were baseball cards. At first, I welcomed him. Crestwood needed guidance to scale, and Victor promised he could take us global. He joined the board, brought in new hires, and pushed us toward profitability. For a while, it seemed like he really did have the company's best interests at heart. But looking back now, I can see the cracks forming even then. Little comments in meetings, subtle shifts in strategy, and an increasingly hands-on approach that bordered on micromanagement. Still, I trusted him. After all, he'd signed the same shareholder agreements as everyone else. He played by the rules, or so I assumed. Then came the day that changed everything. It started innocently enough. A routine board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I arrived early, clutching my notes and a cup of tea, ready to present our Q3 earnings report. The room buzzed with the usual pre-meeting chatter, but there was an undercurrent of tension I couldn't quite place. As soon as everyone settled into their seats, Victor cleared his throat and called the meeting to order. Only instead of diving into the agenda, he slid a document across the table toward me. "Lila," he said, his tone clipped and formal, "we need to discuss your future with Crestwood." My stomach dropped. Future? What was he talking about? I glanced at the paper, my eyes scanning the bolded text at the top. Termination agreement. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Severance terms, non-disclosure clauses, and a list of intellectual property rights being transferred to him. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. "This is a restructuring," Victor replied smoothly, leaning back in his chair like he was discussing nothing more consequential than lunch plans. "The board feels it's time for fresh leadership. You've done incredible work getting us this far, but Crestwood needs someone with experience navigating the complexities of international markets." "Experience?" I shot back, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You mean someone willing to sell out our mission for short-term profits?" Victor smirked, unfazed. "Call it what you want, but effective immediately, you're relieved of your duties as CEO. Don't worry, we'll honor your contributions. Your patents, however, will remain with the company." That's when the room tilted. My patents, the ones I'd poured my soul into developing, the ones that bore my name and signature. He couldn't just take them, could he? Over the next few days, I spiraled. Sleep eluded me, replaced by endless loops of self-doubt and fury. How could this happen? Hadn't I done everything right? I'd sacrificed relationships, weekends, holidays, all for Crestwood. And now, after all that, I was being tossed aside like yesterday's news. But anger isn't productive unless you channel it, and somewhere deep inside, a spark ignited. This wasn't over. Not yet. I dug out the original founder's contract I'd signed when Crestwood Incorporated. Back then, I'd been naive enough to think legal documents were just formalities. Now, I realized they might be my only lifeline. Flipping through the pages, I found exactly what I was looking for. A clause stating that any intellectual property developed under my leadership belonged to me unless explicitly reassigned in writing. Victor hadn't bothered to reassign anything. He'd assumed my patents automatically transferred with the company. Big mistake. Armed with this knowledge, I reached out to my lawyer, Rachel. She listened patiently as I explained the situation, her expression growing darker with each detail. By the time I finished, she was practically vibrating with indignation. "He's playing dirty," she said, slamming her fist on the desk. "But we can fight back. Let's shut him down." And so, the plan began to take shape. I wouldn't go quietly into the night. If Victor wanted a war, he'd get one, but on my terms. The days that followed were a blur of legal filings, media outreach, and clandestine meetings with former colleagues who still believed in me. Word spread quickly within the industry, and soon, whispers of corporate sabotage filled the halls of trade shows and networking events. Some rallied behind me, praising my courage and calling for accountability. Others dismissed me as bitter and vindictive, claiming I couldn't handle losing control of my own company. Through it all, Victor remained eerily calm. He gave interviews painting himself as the savior of Crestwood, spinning tales of mismanagement and inefficiency under my leadership. His PR machine churned out press releases faster than I could respond, casting doubt on my version of events. But I refused to back down. Every accusation he lobbed my way only fueled my determination to expose the truth. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment staring at the city lights, I realized something important. This fight wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every entrepreneur who'd ever been pushed aside by greed and arrogance. It was about proving that integrity mattered, even in a world obsessed with profit margins. And most importantly, it was about showing Victor, and anyone else who dared underestimate me, that I wasn't going anywhere. As the battle raged on, alliances shifted, secrets unraveled, and the line between friend and foe blurred beyond recognition. Just when I thought I understood the stakes, new revelations surfaced that threatened to upend everything. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges I couldn't have imagined when I first dreamed of changing the world. But one thing was clear, I wasn't fighting alone. Somewhere along the way, I'd become more than just a founder or an inventor. I'd become a symbol, a reminder that sometimes the greatest innovations aren't born in labs or factories but in the unyielding spirit of those who refuse to give up. And trust me, I wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. The turning point came unexpectedly, and not in the way I'd planned. It wasn't a dramatic courtroom showdown or a viral social media post that tipped the scales. Instead, it was a quiet conversation with someone I hadn't expected to hear from. Marcus Chun, one of Crestwood's earliest investors and a man who had been conspicuously absent during Victor's hostile takeover. Marcus called me late one night, his voice low and urgent. "Lila," he said without preamble, "we need to talk." I hesitated. Marcus had always been pragmatic, more interested in numbers than ideals. When Victor took over, Marcus stayed silent, neutral at best, complicit at worst. But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet him the next morning at a small cafe far from prying eyes. He arrived looking older than I remembered, his usual sharp suit replaced by a rumpled blazer and tired eyes. Without waiting for pleasantries, he slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, emails, financial reports, internal memos, all pointing to something I hadn't dared to suspect. Victor hadn't just orchestrated my ousting. He'd been planning it for months, long before the board meeting where he blindsided me. These emails show Victor coordinating with offshore entities to siphon funds out of Crestwood, Marcus explained, tapping a finger on one particularly damning thread. He wasn't just after your patents, Lila. He was after everything, the company, its assets, its future. And once he had control, he planned to dismantle it piece by piece. My stomach churned as I flipped through the pages. Each line confirmed what I'd suspected but couldn't prove. Victor's interest in Crestwood wasn't about innovation or growth. It was about greed. Pure and simple. "But why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You could have stopped him earlier." Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples like the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. "Because I made a mistake," he admitted. When Victor came in with his promises of bigger profits and faster exits, I let myself believe him. I thought he'd honor the vision we all started with. But now, he trailed off, shaking his head. Now I see how wrong I was. You built Crestwood for the right reasons, Lila. If anyone can save it, it's you. With Marcus's evidence in hand, the tide began to turn. Rachel worked tirelessly to file injunctions and subpoenas, freezing Crestwood's assets until the truth came to light. Meanwhile, I reached out to key players within the company, engineers, designers, even former interns, who still believed in our mission. Together, we formed an underground network, gathering intel and rallying support behind the scenes. Victor, sensing the ground shifting beneath him, grew desperate. His PR machine cranked into overdrive, painting me as unstable and vindictive. But this time, the narrative didn't stick. Journalists started digging deeper, uncovering inconsistencies in Victor's story. Employees spoke out about toxic leadership and questionable decisions. Investors pulled their funding, citing concerns over mismanagement. The empire Victor had tried so hard to build began crumbling around him. And then came the hearing. It was surreal walking into that courtroom, surrounded by reporters and spectators eager to witness the downfall of a corporate titan. Victor sat across from me, his polished veneer cracking under the pressure. As Rachel presented our case, laying out every email, every memo, every patent clause, he slumped lower in his seat, his confidence evaporating like smoke. When it was my turn to testify, I stood tall, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I spoke not just as a founder betrayed, but as a champion of integrity and purpose. I reminded the court, and everyone watching, that Crestwood wasn't just a company, it was an idea worth fighting for. The judge's ruling came swiftly. Victor was stripped of his position, banned from serving on any corporate board for the next decade, and ordered to return all intellectual property rights to me. Crestwood would survive, but only if I wanted it to. In the weeks that followed, I faced a choice no one could have prepared me for. Rebuilding Crestwood wouldn't be easy. The damage Victor inflicted ran deep, leaving scars on both the company and its people. Some urged me to walk away, to start fresh with a new venture untainted by betrayal. Others begged me to stay, arguing that abandoning Crestwood would mean letting Victor win. Ultimately, I chose neither path, at least not entirely. Instead, I decided to reinvent Crestwood. With the help of loyal employees and renewed investor support, we restructured the company from the ground up, placing ethics and transparency at its core. We opened partnerships with community organizations, ensuring our technology benefited those who needed it most. And perhaps most importantly, we created safeguards to prevent another Victor Lang from ever seizing control again. As for me, I stepped down as CEO, not because I couldn't handle the job, but because I realized leadership isn't defined by titles. My role wasn't to run Crestwood forever, it was to give it life and set it free. So, I became its chief advocate, traveling the world to share our story and inspire others to fight for their dreams, no matter the odds. Looking back, I see now that losing Crestwood was never the worst thing that could have happened to me. What would have truly destroyed me was giving up, giving in, letting fear or bitterness dictate my actions. Instead, I chose resilience. I chose hope. And in doing so, I found a strength I didn't know I had. So here I am today, standing tall and proud, not just as Lila Monroe, founder of Crestwood Innovations, but as a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, justice has a way of finding its own path. Victor may have tried to take everything from me, but in the end, he gave me something far more valuable. Proof that when you stand up for what's right, the universe has a funny way of standing with you. And trust me, that's a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life. The day Crestwood Innovations officially reopened its doors felt like a rebirth. The old office above the pizza shop had been replaced by a sprawling, sunlit campus designed to foster creativity and collaboration. Solar panels lined the roof, wind turbines spun gently in the courtyard, and every corner buzzed with energy, not just from machines, but from people who believed in something greater than themselves. I stood on the stage at the grand reopening ceremony, my heart swelling as I looked out at the crowd. Former colleagues, new hires, investors, community leaders, even Marcus Chen, they were all there, cheering not just for me, but for what Crestwood represented: resilience, innovation, and the power of doing good. This isn't just a company, I said into the microphone, my voice steady and warm. This is proof that integrity matters, that purpose is stronger than greed, and that when we come together, we can create something extraordinary. Applause erupted, echoing through the space like thunder. But the moment that truly took my breath away came when Rachel stepped forward, holding up a framed document. It was the original patent, the one Victor had tried so desperately to steal. Beneath it was an inscription: "To Lila Monroe, for proving that ideas are worth fighting for." Tears welled in my eyes as the crowd chanted my name. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about the ripple effect of standing firm in your convictions. Crestwood's technology was already making waves, powering schools in underserved communities, bringing light to remote villages, and reducing carbon footprints worldwide. Our mission was alive and thriving, thanks to everyone who refused to let it die. After the speeches ended and the ribbon was cut, I wandered through the bustling halls, stopping to chat with employees and shake hands with visitors. Near the entrance, I spotted someone unexpected, Dr. Elena Ruiz, a brilliant scientist whose research I'd admired for years. She approached me hesitantly, clutching a folder. "Lila," she began, her voice tinged with awe, "I heard about everything you went through. What you've done, it's inspired so many of us. I wanted to share something with you." She handed me the folder, which contained blueprints for a groundbreaking advancement in energy storage efficiency, a project she'd been working on quietly for years. "I think this could change the game," she said softly. "And if anyone deserves to bring it to life, it's Crestwood." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Here was another reminder that the fight hadn't just saved Crestwood. It had reignited faith in the power of bold ideas. I hugged Elena tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude. Months later, Crestwood hit yet another milestone, our first major international rollout. Communities across 3 continents gained access to affordable, sustainable energy solutions. News outlets hailed us as pioneers, entrepreneurs called us trailblazers, and kids in classrooms started talking about renewable energy with excitement instead of dread. But the happiest moment came on a quiet evening at home. My parents visited for dinner, carrying a bottle of sparkling cider to celebrate. As we sat around the table laughing, my mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "You know," she said, her eyes glistening, "when you were little, you used to tell me you wanted to fix the world. I never doubted you could do it. I just didn't know how big the world would turn out to be." Dad nodded, raising his glass. "To fixing things," he said with a grin. "And to never giving up." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Crestwood wasn't perfect. We still faced challenges, setbacks, and sleepless nights, but it was exactly where it needed to be. A beacon of possibility, a testament to the strength of unity and vision. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought about Victor. Not with anger or bitterness, but with quiet resolve. He'd underestimated me, yes, but in doing so, he forced me to discover just how strong I really was. And while he faded into obscurity, I chose to focus on the future, a future filled with light, progress, and endless potential. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't about revenge. They're about rising higher, building brighter, and proving that no matter how dark things seem, the human spirit can always find its way back to the sun. And trust me, Crestwood and I, we're shining brighter than ever.